Hey, and welcome to another edition of Liberty on Caffeine. How you doing today, Jeff?
Good morning. How are you?
Hey, fantastic. Today we've got thousands of people that are heading on their ways to state capitals throughout the country and to Washington, D.C. for a rally in support of making America great again, trying to get the vote tallies to be honest, et cetera, et cetera. But there are a lot of things that have gone out and tried to portray this as a right-wing racist
conspiracy theorist.
Exactly. And that gave rise to a conversation that you and I were having about the false political spectrum. And today we're going to be talking about that exact same thing, about the false spectrum that everybody's been taught for years and years about the left and right. And we're going to continue on with that after our introduction.
Right.
We want to get it on because we don't get along. We want to get on because we don't get along.
What up? What up? Oh yeah. Here I stand with the mic in my hand, and I will pray to the Lord. I do the best that I can, 'cause in a world where possession is a question of a man's word, but we all have the same nature. So I'm sticking around and I'll be taking it down. I'll be taking my time as I can smoke it through. Never quit because it makes my family grow. I will help me out of this one more time, and I say, can you help me? Can you help me get the hell out of here? Can you help me? Can you help me get the hell out? One for the money and two for the show. Three to get ready to bust down your door. And into one for the money and two for the show. Three to get ready to bust down your door. And into boom, boom, pack of my crew, got so hot. Never ever quit, people hitting like a trap. With the boom, boom, pack of my crew, got so hot. Never ever quit, people hitting like a trap.
You can see I put up on the screen, we've got a little bit about the political spectrum that people are taught or think about, either the left and right being Democrats and Republicans, or conservatives and progressive liberals. Yeah. Hippies to conservatives, if you think back to the 60s and so on. And you and I are going to discuss what we call the true political spectrum, which is the statism, the totalitarianists, as opposed to the anarchists, the people who want no government whatsoever, and the spectrum that lies between. Why don't you go ahead and go ahead?
I wanted to add into that anarchy is not necessarily people who want no government so much as it is a political ideal. It's like trying to say, well, we know we've got millions of people and that we need some sort of common ground to start our society on.
Yeah, so, and a lot of
even minarchists believe anarchy is a political ideal. Not necessarily that they don't want any government. So, yeah, I just want to make sure that's clarified for people.
And some people that aren't familiar with the libertarian lexicon, when we talk about anarchy and minarchy, you can always look those things up online, get a little bit better, clearer definitions of it. But they are pretty much how they sound like. Minarchy is saying a little bit of government control, but very little that's in it. Anarchy is total, but when they say total, they're not saying running amok, and that is a misconception that goes out.
What it is, there's actually a couple of definitions for the term, and one of them is complete lack of government and complete society out of control. That is one of the definitions of that anarchy, but that is not what is meant when it's spoken in political terms. It is the idea of ultimate liberty by a complete absence of government, not necessarily chaos by complete absence. So.
True.
That's where the misunderstanding comes in.
Yeah, and this idea has been around for thousands of years. This goes back to the beginning of the Chinese dynasties with Lao Tzu and talking about the reduction or the elimination of government and total freedom of people's spirits and decisions. And it's kind of worked its way throughout our history in Western civilization, but it's also diminished at times throughout history, and then had to have where it reemerges again. But again, we're going to get back to this, the dangers that we're starting to experience today because of that false narrative of the political spectrum. We were talking about how there's some things that look like they're opposites, but they're actually the same thing, except with a different coding. And one of the things we were talking about is these racist or racial identity groups that come out. Black Lives Matter is founded by a group of Marxists.
Two college Marxist students, yes.
Two college Marxists.
And Karl Marx just happens to be one of the biggest racists in the history of the world as well. So,
and most of and most of the communist, Marxist, socialist regimes that have been out there that are very totalitarian have also been shown to be very racist also.
Or at least at a minimum, if they're not racist, then they have to have someone else to blame. They have to be a victim, or have to have a victim, be victimized, and there has to be a victimizer. So, not necessarily Jewish could be a race or it could be a religion, and Hitler chose them. It's what they call critical race theory, and it's definitely based on Marxism.
And the critical race theory is really what's so funny is it is a very racist theory. It is pretty much saying that if you're not part of the majority race, that you are a victim, and so anything that you do from here on that would espouse the types of victimhood that you've experienced in the past or in the present is okay to inflict upon the majority race.
Correct. When slavery was legal, it was because the slaves were not seen as humans, but rather property, subhuman, not part of, and basically in America and the later times, it was majority African slaves. So now what's happening is, as we judge people based on their skin color as to their humanity and civility, that's being done to us today as a majority in the country of white. Because of my skin color, I'm inherently racist somehow. Well, that's like looking at a black person and saying, because of your skin color, you're subhuman and actually property. I mean,
so in essence, the new Nazis or the neo-Nazis and some of these people from BLM are one and the same, because they both want to throw out the idea that Martin Luther King had of individualism and judging people by character.
Correct. They want to throw that out. And,
right out the window.
And this is also not just so far as, the population or being a majority in the country. If you believe in borders and legal immigration, you're all of a sudden somehow a racist. And so even though I get called racist, when I ask what race illegal immigrant is, no one can give me an answer. They're brown people from the South. Well, that's funny, because my wife was Argentine immigrant from South America. So I'm kind of confused as to how I'm racist. By supporting.
And yet and now the Cuban Americans who come from immigrant families who fled Cuba are racist.
Yes.
And that's all because of the convoluted upside down world of this theory that has been put out. Yeah, Peter Kalbach.
I'm a Christian, white Christian male, heterosexual. So I'm a homophobe for being Christian and heterosexual. I'm a racist for being white, and I'm mistreating women by paying them less because I'm a male. And here's the thing.
Yeah.
Single people bear the majority of the tax load for the country. I pay more in taxes and more for being a single person than they do, and I'm the one that's negative towards them and treating them poorly.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And it just makes no sense. But anyway.
Well, we had a comment. Peter Kalbacher was saying now it's corporate slavery, which is not. That's not false.
It isn't. We've discussed a couple of times the banking systems and the control that they have. I believe they're the ones pushing the COVID-19 narrative. And they also, as I mentioned, and this was proven, I believe, by a college in Scandinavia, ran some artificial intelligence on a computer program to track the ownership of the stocks of all international corporations. 40% of all international corporations are owned by banks. Might be 40% stock in this one, 100% in this one, and 0%. But overall, they own 40% of all international corporations. And so the same bank that control our money control the corporations and control the government. So it all boils back down to, it might seem like corporatocracy, but it's really the banks that are in charge.
Right. And I want to be clear with some people too that are that may be listening. When we're talking about banks, we're not talking about, we hear a lot of these ridiculous things about, well, the banks are owned by, a particular religious group of people. They're not. They really are not. It doesn't have anything to do with a particular group or ethnicity of the people who are in banking or it happened to be in power. It has to do with the character of those people that have control, and money is power.
And now I will say that a particular religious philosophy may encourage such actions over another one. And we can't leave out the fact that all of this is based on people's beliefs. Everybody believes in something. And that there are some philosophies that are negative toward non-believers and treat non-believers differently, basically two-class system, two sets of civil law. And that does need to be considered. And to people's philosophy, which you brought up in a different, so I mean, it could actually involve religion in some ways.
Yeah, you're correct in the way that religion does bring in philosophy, and philosophy does come into individual character that's drawn into people. Absolutely. With that, let's just take a short break, and we're going to come back with some more of this discussion.
Braxton was diagnosed with choroid plexus carcinoma, a brain tumor. St. Jude is helping us put away our fears. We have an amazing team that fights for the best outcome for Braxton. He has the best chance here. I don't have to worry that how much is that bag of fluid going to cost me? Can I afford it to save my child's life? The donations, they're paying for me to live every day with my son, be stress-free, and enjoy every day with him. I wish there was a word bigger than thank you, more close to the heart, because thank you's not enough. They've given me hope. They've given me my son.
St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
Well, along with what we've been discussing right now, we have got to be able to get the people to understand the true political spectrum that's out there. Now, again, I put the other way. I put the this little illustration back up here on the true political spectrum, showing statism to anarchy, and how close the American political parties, the two major American political parties are, where the Constitution lies, is far away from where the parties are today. And that has got to, that has to start troubling people if they start recognizing and discovering what is going on in our country and why we're heading down the path to slavery, to feudalism.
Well, here's the thing. These are not new concepts. These are not new ideas that just popped up out of nowhere. You can go back to the founding of the country and the writings. I'm a big fan of Jefferson and his philosophy and his form of government. And, he compared, he laid it out in some of his writings. He compared the Indians, which he considered to be as close to ultimate liberty as you could get with no government in existence, to total and complete control of every move in individuals' lives as the two ends of political spectrum, and even mentioned that the United Kingdom of England at the time fell closer to the control by government than what America had established. So basically, there's only 2 points. There's either big government control or anarchy, and everything else falls somewhere else on that line. That's, you hear people talk about it's democratic socialism. It's different. Well, yeah, it's different. It falls on the line to the left, just not quite as far left yet. So, these things, it's not something that somebody has to discover or learn. This concept was around at the founding of the country. And they looked at these options and said, well, this is what we don't want because this is what we had with England. And this is what we do want. We want to be as free as possible, but we can't really make a big society of millions of people without some kind of groundwork. And so they laid out a minimum groundwork to follow. And that's been turned into socialism on both sides. There is no Liberty Party out there that has any popularity today. That's the big problem.
Yeah. Well, and when you're discussing this too, it's a shame that many of the people are not even familiar with, much less have read or studied the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist papers, the writings that went on even after the Declaration and the Constitution was laid out. This is a discussion that should have been continued on throughout our history and not brushed aside. But you and I had discussed in earlier broadcasts too about when the progressive era started creeping into American politics. It was first really pushed on by somebody that doesn't even really be tacked on as progressive, which was Teddy Roosevelt and some of his introductions to legislation that was brought in. So it's amazing that people really don't have a touch for the feel for history, for politics, for just even some of these things that is going on.
What frustrates me the most is the way that a parent can send their child to school, have them educated into some socialist ideology, and then complain about this education that their children receive.
Yeah.
Just like everything else in that child's life, the education is the parent's responsibility.
Absolutely.
This shows me, and I apologize if I hurt anybody's feelings or insult anyone, but it shows me that the parents aren't taking responsibility for the child's education. Yeah, they get them dressed, they drop them off for school, they make sure they complete their assignments, they make sure they're getting good grades, but had no idea what they're learning or being taught, and not teaching them any different or any better.
It's the surrendering of personal responsibility. It starts out with surrendering it for parenting, and then in the child's life themselves, they start losing all desire for personal responsibility and surrender it over to the government.
Correct. And the government enjoys taxing people at such a high rate that the parents have to work to support the child, to keep food in their mouth, in their belly, and a roof over their heads, which also leaves government freedom to educate the child in whatever system they want. But in the end, it all falls back to the parent's responsibility, whether they're being overtaxed, both have to work 2 jobs to just put a roof and put food in this child's stomach. That child's education is still the parents' responsibility, not the government's and not the schools.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we got 20,000 pages of text that were created, over 20,000 pages of text that were created by the founding fathers, available online through the Library of Congress right now, this second. How many parents show their children this information?
Wow. Yeah. Very true.
The schools don't. Why don't the parents?
Yeah.
So
I've
get back
seen,
to it.
yeah.
We've got socialism growing through the school systems and not being addressed by the parents.
Mm-hmm. Precisely. Well, we've got, I have been real happy though. I've seen this child study that's, or readings that have been put on line called the Tuttle Twins. And I encourage people, if they've got young children, grandchildren, to look into that. It seems like it would be a great introduction, a way to get around the indoctrination that these young children are getting in the state school systems. I don't have the link to it. I'll try to see if I can provide something like that for later on. If anybody is watching or listening, go ahead and put the link on for us. That would be great. Well, go ahead.
If anyone's interested in learning additional founding principles beyond just the 20,000 pages created by the 20,000 plus pages created by the founders, go back to the Protestant Reformation, which was mentioned earlier, and the formation of the Quakers. You'll find that the majority of the laws that govern the United States today were prototypes from the Quaker colonies. Much more so, you do have philosophers that wrote about it in books, but these were actually applied in the colonies and in use. And the fruits of those laws, the results could be seen and measured. So if you really want more, start back at the Protestant Reformation, start with the Quakers, and go through the laws of the colonies and the beliefs. And of course, the Age of Reason is important as well. And that'll give you a pretty rounded education for a child. Also, one other thing I'd suggest, the Jefferson Bible has been issued to every new member of Congress. They stopped for a while and then started again. It is a very basic introduction. I think he wrote it to help introduce the Native Americans to Christianity. But it's important in our politics because it's issued to every new member of Congress.
Ah, perfect. Yeah, and I'm kind of glad you mentioned that too. People were very excited when they found out that Barack Obama got sworn in on Jefferson's Koran, but they don't know the history about Jefferson's Koran and what it actually brought about. It brought about the Marine Corps. Actually, his reading and understanding of Islam led him to believe that there was no way that we could be able to solve the problems of the Barbary Coast with political or any type of talk or reason with the people. And therefore he decided to do the invasion of Tripoli.
If I'm not mistaken, before Jefferson was elected president, he and I'm trying to think of who the other representative was. I want to say Adams, but I could be wrong on that. He and another founder met with an emissary from, I believe it was Tripoli. I think it was Tripoli to discuss why they were attacking us when we had caused no harm and provoked them in no way.
Yeah.
And they reported back to then Secretary of State John Jay, and within their report it says, well, our God tells us that we have a right to plunder the infidels. First ones off the ship get extra rewards and more women to rape and a bigger share of the rewards for us doing this.
And it was with Adams. Yeah.
And Jefferson said that we practice the Quaker philosophy regarding foreign policy, which was not get involved and keep hands off as much as possible. So we paid bribes or tithes, hijaz, I believe they're referred. I don't know the actual Hebrew term for it or the whatever term they use. We had to pay them to not attack our ships and enslave our steal our cargo and enslave our people, which they continue to do anyway.
Yeah.
And the reason, once Jefferson was elected, he'd already had experience with these guys and knew you could, like you said, you can't reason with them because this is a holy thing. Their God grants them the power to do.
Yeah.
Their prophet was a murderer, warlord, slave, or pedophile. And to me, that's not a good role model for a religion. So anyway, what happened was the tithes that we paid had to be paid to each of the separate caliphates. We had to pay Ottoman separate from Tripoli, and the cost became so great that we couldn't operate a country. That's the reason the Marines were formed. We couldn't afford to continue to pay the bribes.
Mm-hmm.
Our policy was still standoff. They gave us no other option at that time. That's the truth.
And Jefferson's legacy actually kind of seeped into Obama as he paid the bribes and ended up bombing the heck out of the people in the Middle East anyway. And it wasn't corrected until 2016 when Trump got into power, and not that he's been I guess he's been a much more anti-war president than we've seen in at least a few decades. So
not only is he anti-war, he is pro-tariffs to protect jobs and industries, which was also discussed and implemented by our founders.
Mm-hmm.
Anti-taxation, which is property theft.
Yeah.
Tariffs are a form of taxation, but they're voluntary. You're not forced to sell your products in our country. You don't have to pay the tax if you don't want to sell it. And reduction in the size of government by removing some legislation and some laws to provide a little more freedom. Mm-hmm. I think in those economically and financially, what he's done has been as close to the founding principles as any president in modern times. Unfortunately, when it comes to the social end, he has been more progressive than many in the modern times. So it's a trade-off between good finances don't do you any good if you're throwing money away on programs that don't work.
That's true. That's true. Well, let's take another one of our small breaks. We're going to come back. We're going to try to do a little bit of a wrap-up and then discuss next week's show, which we touched upon a little bit earlier with the banking and economics.
Every 2 minutes, an American is sexually assaulted. Be the someone who gives their time. Be the someone who lends an ear. Be the someone who takes a step. This is Christina Ricci with RAIN, asking you to join the fight against sexual violence and volunteer in your community. Log on to RAIN.org, that's RAINN.org, to learn how you can be the someone.
This message brought to you by the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network and this station.
Well, I just want to encourage people when we've been talking about this real political spectrum to see if you can get involved, study up, learn a little bit. And if you think that we've said something that might be off kilter, please let us know. Give us a comment. And we're always open to debate and discussion at any time in any post. I'm looking forward to in 2021 when the smoke clears, people decide that this pandemic stuff is a bunch of crap, that we can start going out and doing our broadcasts like we have been before, where you and I can get together in the same studio and get these things going on, and other people can come and visit us and so on. I just pray and hope that this is going to come up fairly soon. But getting back to the political spectrum,
I'd like to just reiterate for the people, because we're trying to make a point. I don't think we've actually outlined it clearly enough.
Mm-hmm.
What we're looking at today is how the right is being accused of being a fascist, homophobic, racist, and we're absolutely the opposite. We want you to live free in how you want to live, so long as you don't harm other peoples and don't try to push through laws. If you have a sexual deviant behavior, you're more than welcome to have that, but don't try to make laws to force us to choose to make it normalized.
Absolutely.
So on the left is fascism, socialism, communism, big government, control of your lives, no freedom. On the right is ultimate freedom. And just to the left of that is where the founding fathers and the country's morals were set, which is as much liberty as possible and as little interference from government as possible. That's the truth. There's no fascism on the right.
Absolutely.
There's no racism on the right. The Democrat Party was the party of racism from its foundation, supported the KKK, wanted a full vote for slaves who had no rights or say so that they could continue to keep control. Even the progressive liberals of the early 1900s were supporters of segregation, equal but separate Jim Crow laws.
Yeah.
Now, the argument I hear against this is the idea that the two parties did a switch sometime in the 60s or 70s. So
I love that fallacy, that fairy tale.
So the party of freedom and liberty, women's rights, because the Quakers were champions of women's rights, and abolition because Quakers were abolitionists, all of a sudden decides that they want to be identified as the party of slavery. Who besides Strom Thurmond made the switch? So the point is here, guys, liberty on the right to the right of the political spectrum is nothing to do with communism, socialism, fascism, and the left has nothing to do with anarchy. They're using the term, they're switching these terms up and confusing them, just like they try to do with the big party switch, in order to project their actions and beliefs onto others to take the blame. That's all it is.
Absolutely. And just a precursor, and it's not untied either. There's a precursor to next week's show. We're going to be talking about banking economics and its ties to global totalitarianism. Do you want to give us a little bit of a brief on your thoughts on on what they're going to be hearing about?
Oh, basically, there have been several attempts to establish national banks in the country, and all were short-lived until the last one. And there was some the founders that were in support of it, but obviously they lost out, and there's good reason for it. I don't want to give away the details, but basically, when you put a private company in charge of your money and interest rates to achieve a certain goal, and the opposites happen and they continue to exist, then there's an issue.
Okay.
And not only have they existed, but they've grown throughout the entire world and have become world banks. So
yeah. And that also is going to be the last show coming up against Thanksgiving. I just want to let people know that that's what's going to be happening. So I hope everybody has a great Saturday. I hope you learned something from Jeff and I. And please, as you're going to see with our little appeal, check us out. See if you can give us some support. You have a great day. And, thanks again, Jeff.
All right. Thank you.
You bet.
All right.
If you enjoy these podcasts, please press like, subscribe, and then share them with your friends. We would greatly appreciate any financial support you can give us. Go to porcupinepundit.com and become a patron or a supporter. You can also buy stuff from us at our Freedom Swag shop.